On Thanksgiving Eve, my stingy Uncle Silas actually sent a $100 gift card in our family group chat. I was quick enough to snag $88 of it. Tommy, Silas's son who just got married, immediately started acting snarky. Percy sure is fast when it comes to grabbing free money. Too bad he isn't that fast at getting married. Unlike me, I actually have a life. He then posted a wedding photo in the group. A 300-pound slob hugging a pretty girl. He did look smug. I replied with a heavy dose of sarcasm. Your wedding cost $50,000, didn't it? Why not send a $500 Venmo to keep the celebration going? The end of the year is always the busiest time at the office. After pulling several all-nighters, I finally headed home for the holidays with a bank balance that had a few more zeros added to it. I've worked hard for years, and now I have more money than I can spend. The price? I'm 30 and still single. My family has no idea I'm the CEO of a publicly traded company. They just think I'm the same guy who comes home alone every year. However, going home for the holidays brings its own set of headaches. We live in a nice suburban neighborhood with central heating, and every year, my Aunt Beatrice and her family barge into our house for Thanksgiving. My mom always says, she's your only aunt. We're family, so don't be so petty. But it isn't about being petty. Every year, Beatrice's family arrives empty-handed and leaves as if they're moving our entire house into theirs. On Thanksgiving morning, I stood by the door, waiting for them. As expected, they showed up with absolutely nothing. As soon as I opened the door, Beatrice greeted me with her booming, obnoxious voice. Is that Percy? Did you come back alone again, or did you finally find someone to tolerate you? She was clearly trying to show off her newly married son. I gave a polite, fake smile, rolled my eyes internally, and didn't bother answering. Silas and Tommy followed her in. Tommy was wearing a pair of knockoff Nikes and holding a refurbished iPhone, strutting as if he owned the place. The three of them sat down on the sofa immediately. My dad hurried to get them water and snacks, while my mom was busy in the kitchen preparing a feast for everyone. Silas looked around our living room like he was a health inspector checking for violations. Arthur, did you forget to pay the heating bill? It doesn't feel as warm as last year. Silas asked my dad, his hand feeling the vent. The furnace has been acting up a bit. It's not running at full capacity, my dad replied with a humble smile while peeling an apple. It's one thing to be a freeloader, but it's another to insult the host. I really don't know how we ended up with such parasitic relatives. Well, we're going to suffer in this cold house today, Silas complained, stuffing a handful of grapes into his mouth. Then Tommy kicked my leg with his fake sneakers. Hey Percy, you've been working in the city for years, but you still dress as plain as you did in high school. I looked at his shoes with the crooked swoosh, his puffer jacket with the misspelled logo, and his designer pants that were clearly cheap polyester. I leaned in and whispered with a harmless smile. Tommy, you should probably trim the loose threads off those fake Nikes. And your jacket looks a bit deflated. Maybe spend less on the brand and more on the quality next time. Tommy stuffed a grape into his mouth and spoke with unearned confidence. My wife bought these for me for the wedding. They're high-end designer. You wouldn't understand style if it hit you in the face. I chuckled. Except for you, nothing in this room you're wearing is real. Beatrice noticed me teasing her golden boy and quickly changed the subject. So, Percy, what are you doing for work these days? How much do you make? Why can't you find a wife? You're not exactly a total loser to look at. I was used to their passive-aggressive comments by now, so I retorted calmly. Well, I'm not like your son. His wedding cost 50 grand. Anyone would think you were buying a bride, not a daughter-in-law. Beatrice's face turned pale instantly. Just as she was about to snap back, my mom walked out of the kitchen with a spatula. Tommy, why didn't you bring your new wife today? Beatrice quickly chimed in. She went to see her own parents first. She'll be here in a few days. I sat there eating an apple and muttered, she probably just didn't want to freeze in our house according to Silas. Tommy glared at me with pure hatred. At least I have a wife. Unlike you, you're just a pathetic bachelor who'll end up living off his parents. I didn't want to sit with these weirdos anymore, so I went to the kitchen to help my mom. As soon as I walked in, she tried to push me back out. Go talk to your aunt. I can handle the kitchen. I'm making all the dishes Tommy likes. I frowned. Mom, why are you making his favorites? I'm your son, remember? Your aunt only visits once a year. After your grandparents passed away, she's the only family your father has left. I'm always here. I can cook for you anytime. Fine. I hated them, but it was the holidays. I didn't want to make a scene for my parents' sake. I looked at my dad and Silas chatting on the sofa and decided to let it go for now. But Beatrice's family had no intention of being civil. When it was time to eat, Beatrice immediately started piling the expensive prime rib and lobster tails onto Tommy's plate. By the time I picked up my fork, the meat dishes were almost empty. They were eating like they hadn't seen food in a year. I quietly put my fork down. Beatrice finally spoke up. Percy, are you still doing that coding stuff? Before I could answer, Tommy interrupted. Being a programmer is hard work, Percy. Careful you don't end up bald like your dad. I saw my dad's embarrassed smile and felt my blood boil. Being bald is better than being a freeloader who wears fake brands and eats like a starving animal because he can't afford steak at home. My mom shot me a look, and I had to keep eating to hide my annoyance. Tommy dropped his fork and stared at me. You took the $88 from my dad's gift card, didn't you? Now you're talking trash. I laughed. Your dad sent $100 total, and I grabbed most of it. This meal alone costs way more than $88. Beatrice rolled her eyes. We're family. Do you really measure family in dollars? You've become so shallow, Percy. I thought to myself, if you roll your eyes any further, you'll see your own brain. Auntie, your son brought up the money first. Don't get mad at me for doing the math. Speaking of money, Tommy acted like he'd been struck by lightning. Uncle Arthur, Auntie, how much are you giving me for a holiday gift this year? Maybe $2,000 each? We spent a lot on the wedding, and you guys didn't give much of a blessing then. This could make up for it. Tommy actually held out his hand. Before I could say anything, he added another jab. And Percy, you're 30. You're too old to be getting holiday money anyway. He gave me a sly, smug grin. You really have no shame, do you, Tommy? I smiled back fakely. I had lost my appetite completely and went back to my room. If these people were my employees, I would have fired them long ago. But they were relatives, so I had to endure it. Suddenly, my mom opened my door. Percy, would you mind moving to the guest room in the garage for a bit? My dad had renovated the garage into a small studio apartment for guests. I was confused. Why? Why should I sleep in the garage? Tommy's wife is coming tomorrow. They need a place to stay, and your room is the nicest. Just for a few days, okay? They're guests. We can't make them stay in the garage. Be a good son, and I'll make your favorite meal after they leave. I was incredibly annoyed, but seeing as they were my dad's only relatives, I compromised. I was packing my things when Tommy walked in. Percy, it's just for a few days. My wife and I won't stay forever. Seeing his smug face made me want to slap him. Tommy, stay here if you must, but don't touch my things. Got it. Tommy didn't care. He was swinging his legs carelessly. Yeah, just leave me a charger. I have the new iPhone, and I don't use knockoff cables. I shook my head and walked out. That afternoon, Tommy's wife Mindy arrived. Hi, I'm Mindy, Tommy's wife, she said sweetly. So beautiful. Tommy has great taste. My mom praised her with a smile. Of course, Auntie. You should find someone for Percy soon. Even someone with a tenth of Mindy's looks would be enough for him. I wanted to punch him. Uncle, Auntie, where's the gift for my wife? It's her first time here. Give her the envelopes. I watched as my parents handed over 2 thick envelopes filled with cash. It hurt to watch. I wouldn't mind burning that money, but giving it to these ungrateful wolves was sickening. After getting the cash, Tommy pulled his wife into my room. I saw him reaching for my display cabinet before the door closed. My cabinet was full of rare, expensive collectibles I'd gathered since high school. I glared and started toward the room. But Beatrice stopped me. Percy, come here. I have some girls for you to meet. I sat on the sofa, still worried about my room. Look at this one. She's divorced with a kid, but she's pretty. Her family only wants $80,000 for the wedding. And this one is 40, but she's never been married. Her family wants $150,000. Auntie, are you looking for Tommy's next wife? I snapped back. I knew she wasn't serious. These were terrible matches meant to mock me. How can you say that? It's the holidays. Don't be so disrespectful. If you actually wanted to help me, you wouldn't show me these. Keep them for your son. I'm not that desperate. Beatrice looked offended. Silas, being clueless, added, Don't mind her, Percy. By the way, what's your position at your company? I wasn't about to tell these bloodsuckers about my wealth. They were already draining us. If they knew I was rich, they'd never leave. I'm just a regular office worker. Nothing special, I lied. Silas nodded, looking satisfied but pretending to be concerned. Maybe you should work with Tommy. He's doing a huge project. It's called the 1040 Project. He'll make millions in 3 years. I nearly had a brain hemorrhage. Silas, did you put your life savings into that? The 1040 thing is a total pyramid scheme. Tommy walked out of the room right then. Pyramid scheme? You don't know anything. This is a top-secret government project. I only told you because we're family. If you want to get rich, ask me. I'm an expert. Tommy looked so proud, as if he were a Fortune 500 CEO. I just stared at this hopeless family and stopped talking. The next morning, I went upstairs and saw water or some liquid leaking from under my bedroom door. My heart sank. I thought a pipe had burst. I grabbed the spare key and rushed inside. But what I found was much worse. The red, sticky puddle was slowly creeping out from under the gap beneath my bedroom door, staining the beige hallway carpet my parents had meticulously cleaned just 2 days ago. It had a cloying, chemical cherry scent that instantly made my stomach turn. I jammed the brass key into the lock, twisted it, and threw the door open. My bedroom looked as if a hurricane had swept through it, leaving behind a trail of cheap cosmetics and wet laundry. But the physical state of the room was nothing compared to the sight in the corner. My custom-built, oak-framed display cabinet, a piece I had imported from Japan to house my most cherished possessions, was lying on its side. The tempered glass door had shattered into 1,000 tiny, glittering shards, which were now mixed with the red cherry soda Mindy had spilled. Inside that cabinet was the only part of my childhood I had kept. I had spent years tracking down mint-condition vintage collectibles, rare-signed first edition novels, and a pristine, 19th century silver chronometer pocket watch my grandfather had given me before he passed. The vintage books were now bloated and stained pink, their rare bindings warped by the cheap soda. My grandfather's pocket watch was sitting in a plastic cup, full of dirty soapy water on the nightstand. Mindy was sitting at my desk, her face covered in a green clay beauty mask, casually filing her nails. Tommy was lying on my bed, his dirty knockoff Nikes resting directly on my white duvet, his fingers flying across his refurbished phone. "Oh hey Percy," Tommy said, not even looking up. "Your cabinet was cheap." Mindy tried to use the top shelf to dry her hair extension pieces and the whole thing just tipped over. "You should really buy sturdier furniture." If it had hit my wife, we'd be talking to a lawyer. My hands clenched into fists in my pockets. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance in his voice was like a physical blow. The pocket watch alone was worth more than his entire $50,000 wedding. It wasn't just a collectible. It was the last thing my grandfather had held. "Get out," I said. My voice was very quiet, very level. It was the tone I used in the boardroom right before I terminated a multi-million-dollar vendor contract. Mindy paused her filing, her eyes widening behind her green mask. "Excuse me? Tommy, is your cousin yelling at me? In his parents' house?" Tommy sat up, his face darkening. "Percy, don't start. It was an accident. We'll give you $20 to buy a new glass shelf at the hardware store. Now stop acting like a child and leave us alone. Mindy is sensitive." Before I could reply, the door behind me burst open. Aunt Beatrice and Uncle Silas marched in, their faces already twisted into defensive scowls. "What is all this shouting?" Beatrice demanded, looking at the broken glass and then at me. "Percy, did you yell at Mindy? She is a guest. She is our family's new daughter-in-law." "She destroyed my grandfather's watch, Beatrice," I said, pointing at the plastic cup. "And she ruined books that cannot be replaced. The damage in this room is worth tens of thousands of dollars." Silas let out a loud, mocking snort. "Tens of thousands? For some old paper and a rusty clock? Percy, this is why you're 30 and single. You're obsessed with junk. Family is what matters." Tommy's wife was just trying to make herself comfortable. "Arthur, Helen, come up here." Beatrice screamed down the stairs, her voice shrill enough to shatter what was left of the glass. "Your son is abusing my children." My parents hurried into the room, their faces pale with anxiety. My mom took one look at the red soda on the carpet and the shattered glass, and her hand immediately went to her chest. "Oh dear," she whispered. "Helen, look at what your son is doing." Beatrice pointed a dramatic, shaking finger at me. "We came here for a peaceful holiday, and he's accusing Mindy of destroying his treasures. If this is how we're going to be treated, we'll leave right now. We'll go stay at a hotel, and everyone in the family will know how Arthur's son kicked us out." My dad looked at Silas, his only brother, whose face was cold and stubborn. My dad was a gentle man, a retired schoolteacher who hated conflict more than anything. He reached out and touched my shoulder. "Percy, please," my dad whispered, his eyes pleading. "It's just a cabinet. We can clean the carpet. Don't make your mother cry on Thanksgiving." I looked at my dad's tired face, then at my mother, who was already wiping a tear from her eye. They had spent their entire lives being the bigger people, letting Silas and Beatrice walk all over them just to keep a fragile peace. I looked at Tommy, who was grinning behind his father's back, mouthing the word loser. "Fine," I said, stepping back into the hallway. "We'll clean it up." I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I went down to the garage, closed the door, and pulled out my work phone, the encrypted one I used for corporate business. I dialed a direct number. "Clara," I said when my executive assistant picked up on the first ring. "I need our head of corporate security and a senior forensic appraiser at my parents' address by tomorrow morning. And Clara, tell the legal team to prepare a civil suit for property damage. I'll send you the photos of the inventory in 5 minutes." "Right away, Mr. Vance," Clara replied, her voice crisp and completely professional. "Should I coordinate with the local police?" "Not yet," I said, looking out the small window of the garage at the cold gray suburban street. "Let's let them enjoy their holiday first." Thanksgiving dinner was a silent, suffocating affair. My mom had spent the afternoon scrubbing the red stain out of my bedroom carpet, while Beatrice and Mindy watched TV in the living room, complaining about the draft. When the food was served, Tommy sat at the head of the table, my father's usual seat, and immediately began describing his 1040 project again. It's about leverage, Uncle Arthur, Tommy said, tearing a turkey leg apart with his greasy fingers. The government has these hidden tax codes. If you invest $20,000 now, you get a guaranteed return of $80,000 in 90 days. I've already got 10 people in my downline. 20,000? My dad asked, his fork pausing. That's a lot of money, Tommy. Are you sure it's legal? Of course it's legal. Silas chimed in, stuffing a giant piece of stuffing into his mouth. Our Tommy is an executive partner now. I put my entire retirement fund into it. Beatrice put her savings in too. We're going to buy a condo in Florida next year. I sat at the far end of the table, eating a dry piece of bread. I had already run a quick background check on the 1040 project through my company's compliance database during the afternoon. It was a classic, brutal Ponzi scheme, run by a shell company registered in Cyprus. The authorities had already frozen 3 of their domestic accounts, but the local recruiters like Tommy didn't know it yet. Tommy, I said quietly, who is your regional director? Is it a man named Marcus Vance? Tommy's fork froze. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. How do you know Marcus's name? Did you look at my papers? I didn't need to look at your papers, I said. Marcus Vance was indicted by the federal regulators 3 days ago for wire fraud and conspiracy. The 1040 project is under a national asset freeze. If you put $20,000 in, you're not getting $80,000 back. You're going to get a visit from the state police. The dining room went dead silent. Then Beatrice let out a loud, screeching laugh. Listen to him, she yelled, looking at my parents. The coder who lives in the garage is trying to give financial advice to my Tommy. Percy, you're just jealous because you make $30 an hour writing lines of text, while my son is dealing with government officials. He's just trying to scare us, Mom, Tommy said, though a tiny telltale bead of sweat had appeared near his temple. He wants us to pull out so he can try to get in. He's always been like this. Greedy. Percy, that's enough, my mom said, her voice trembling slightly. She looked at Beatrice, then at me, her eyes pleading for silence. Let's just eat. No more talk about money. I went back to my bread. I had given them their warning. My conscience was clear. After dinner, Tommy and Mindy went back up to my ruined bedroom, leaving their dirty plates on the table for my mother to clean. I helped her carry the dishes to the sink. Percy, she said, her voice low as she turned on the hot water. I know they're difficult. But Silas helped your father pay for his college books 40 years ago. Your father has never forgotten it. That's why we let them stay. Mom, I said, drying a glass. There's a difference between gratitude and letting parasites bleed you dry. If you keep letting them take, they'll eventually take the house. They wouldn't do that, she said, shaking her head. We're family. I didn't argue. I just kissed her cheek and went down to the garage. At 8 a.m. the next morning, the quiet of our suburban street was broken by the low, expensive hum of a black Mercedes sedan parking in the driveway. I was already awake, sitting on the front porch with a cup of black coffee. A tall woman in a tailored gray suit got out of the car, carrying a professional leather briefcase. Behind her was a burly man in a dark blue windbreaker with Summit Secure printed in small, silver letters on the chest. Mr. Vance, the woman said, walking up the steps. She was my company's senior forensic appraiser, Sarah Choi. I have the inventory files you sent. We're ready to conduct the assessment. The room is upstairs, Sarah, I said, standing up. My cousin and his wife are currently sleeping in it. Be thorough. Before we could reach the front door, it swung open. Silas stood there in his undershirt, holding a cup of my dad's coffee, his eyes squinting in the bright morning sun. Percy, who are these people? Why are they parking in the driveway? This is Sarah, I said. She's here to appraise the damage to my property. Silas's face turned a dark, angry red. Are you still on about that? I told you. We're not paying for your cheap toys. Get these people off our property before I call the police. Actually, sir, Sarah said, her voice cool and perfectly professional as she pulled a digital tablet from her case. The property in question includes a 19th century silver chronometer pocket watch with a certified manufacturer's mark from 1884. Its estimated market value prior to water and chemical exposure was $42,000. We also have 12 signed first edition novels with water damage, valued at approximately $600 each. Understate. Law: civil property damage exceeding $5,000 is classified as a Class D felony. Silas's coffee cup shook. 42,000? For a rusty watch. It wasn't rusty, Uncle Silas, I said, stepping past him into the hallway. Until your daughter-in-law put it in soapy water to clean her makeup brushes. The noise brought everyone out of their rooms. Beatrice came down the stairs in her bathrobe, screaming about the harassment, while Tommy and Mindy stood at the top of the landing, looking disheveled and suddenly very nervous. What is going on here? Beatrice shrieked. Arthur! Helen! Get out here! My parents came out of the kitchen, their faces pale. My dad looked at the security guard in the hallway, then at me. Percy, what is this? This is the law, Dad, I said. I'm not letting them destroy our home anymore. You think you're so smart, Percy? Tommy yelled from the stairs, his voice cracking. My project is going to make me millions. I can buy 10 of your stupid watches. I'm an executive partner. Just as the words left his mouth, a loud, heavy banging rattled the front door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the solid, rhythmic pounding of heavy fists against wood. Through the frosted glass of the front door, we could see the silhouettes of 3 large men. Silas frowned, stepping toward the door. Is that the neighbors? Why are they knocking like that? He pulled the door open. 3 men in heavy, stained work jackets stepped directly into the hallway. They didn't look like our quiet suburban neighbors. Their faces were hard, weathered, and their eyes were fixed entirely on Tommy. Where is he? The leader said. He was a broad-shouldered man with a thick beard, his knuckles raw and red from the cold. Where's Tommy Sterling? Tommy shrunk back on the stairs, his face turning the color of chalk. Who are you? You know who we are, you little rat, the man said, taking a step toward the stairs. Silas tried to block him, but the man simply pushed him aside with one hand, sending Silas stumbling into the coat rack. You took $40,000 of our union's emergency fund for your 1040 project. You told us the payout was yesterday. The servers are down. Tommy stammered, his hands shaking as he clutched the banister. It's just a temporary technical issue. Marcus Vance is handling it. Marcus Vance is in federal custody, the bearded man said, pulling a folded newspaper from his pocket and throwing it at Tommy's feet. The project is gone. The website is down. We went to your address, the one you put on the contracts, and the landlord said you don't live there. He said you used your uncle's house as your business registry. My dad gasped, looking at Arthur. What? Our address? Yes, old man, the leader said, looking at my dad with a mixture of pity and anger. Your nephew registered his fraudulent investment firm under this address. Legally, you guys are liable for his debts. We want our $40,000 now, or we're going to start taking things out of this house. Beatrice fell to her knees, let out a loud theatrical wail, and grabbed the leader's muddy boot. Please, we don't have the money. We put our savings in. To Silas, tell them. Get off me, the man said, kicking his leg free. He looked at the nice television, the silver-plated tea set on the sideboard, and the leather sofas. Start loading the truck, boys. Stop right there, I said. The 3 men turned to look at me. I was still sitting on the bottom step of the stairs, my coffee cup in my hand. Who the hell are you? The leader asked. His brother? You want to pay his debt? I'm Percy, I said, standing up. And you're currently committing home invasion and attempted grand larceny. If you take one step toward that television, my security detail, who is currently standing behind you, has full authority to detain you. The burly man in the Summit Secure windbreaker stepped forward, his hand resting casually on the utility belt at his waist. The 3 collectors paused, looking at his professional gear and the expensive Mercedes parked in the driveway. We just want our money, the leader muttered, his voice losing some of its aggressive edge. This kid ruined our families. I know, I said. And you'll get your money, but not from my parents. And not by stealing our furniture. Before anyone could speak, 2 more cars pulled into the driveway, their blue and red lights flashing against the living room windows. 2 county sheriff's deputies walked up the steps, followed by my personal assistant, Clara, who was holding a thick leather folder. Mr. Vance, Clara said, stepping into the hallway. She didn't look at Beatrice or Silas. She walked straight to me and handed me the tablet. The state police have already issued the arrest warrant for Tommy Sterling for securities fraud and grand larceny. The local deputies are here to execute it. The deputies walked past the 3 collectors, who immediately stepped aside, their hands raised in peace. Tommy Sterling? The lead deputy asked, looking up at the stairs. Tommy looked like he was about to vomit. He looked at his father, then at his mother, but they were both frozen in terror. Mindy had already retreated into my bedroom, locking the door behind her. Yes, Tommy whispered. The deputy walked up the stairs, pulled Tommy's arms behind his back, and clicked the silver handcuffs into place. You have the right to remain silent. The deputy began, leading him down the stairs. Dad. Mom. Help me. Tommy screamed, his knockoff Nikes dragging against the wood. Percy. Please. Tell them it was a mistake. Arthur. Helen. Do something. Beatrice screamed, lunging toward my mother. He's your nephew. You have millions in your retirement. Pay the 40,000. Save him. My mom looked at Beatrice. For the first time in her life, her face wasn't filled with soft, anxious pity. It was flat, cold, tired. No, Beatrice, my mom said, her voice quiet but steady. We're not paying. What? Beatrice shrieked, her face contorting in pure hatred. You selfish old hag. After everything we did for you. You didn't do anything for us, Beatrice, my dad said, stepping in front of my mom. His voice was stronger than I had ever heard it. Silas bought me 2 books. 40 years ago. And I have spent 40 years letting you eat our food, ruin our home, and insult our son to pay for it. The debt is settled. The deputies led Tommy out the door. The 3 collectors followed them, looking subdued, realizing they would have to file their claims through the state receiver. Sarah, our appraiser, stepped forward and handed Silas a white, legal document. This is a formal civil summons, Sarah said. For $48,600 in property damage. If you do not settle the amount within 30 days, Summit Holdings will initiate foreclosure proceedings on your property in New Jersey. Silas stared at the paper, his mouth open, his jaw trembling. Summit Holdings? Who is Summit Holdings? My company, I said, taking my coat from the rack. Silas looked at me, then at Clara, who was standing beside me with her tablet, then at the Mercedes parked in the driveway. You're a coder, Silas whispered. You're a loser. I'm the CEO of Summit Holdings, Uncle Silas, I said, sliding my grandfather's silver pocket watch, now dry and resting in a protective velvet case, into my pocket. We're a publicly traded company. We own the building your son's fake firm was registered in. Now I suggest you pack your things and leave. The cleaning crew arrives at noon. By 2 p.m., the house was silent again. The Mercedes was gone, the police cars were gone, and the cheap red cherry soda had been completely scrubbed from my bedroom carpet by a professional restoration crew Clara had sent. My display cabinet had been cleared of the broken glass, the oak wood polished until it shone like bronze. My dad was sitting on the sofa, peeling an apple with a small knife, a peaceful smile on his face. The house felt warm, really warm, for the first time in years. The furnace had been fixed by a technician I'd called that morning. My mom walked out of the kitchen, carrying a fresh plate of prime rib and a bowl of sweet potatoes. Percy, she said, setting the plate in front of me. I made your favorite. Thanks, Mom, I said, picking up my fork. Your assistant. Clara, my dad said, looking up from his apple. She was very polite. She said you're a very respected leader downtown. She's a good assistant, Dad, I said, taking a bite of the steak. My dad nodded, his eyes warm. I always knew you were smart, Percy. I'm glad you kept the watch. I'm keeping it in my office downtown from now on, I said, patting my pocket. It's safer there. My mom sat beside my dad, resting her head on his shoulder. There were no tears in her eyes, no anxiety about the family gossip. The air in the room was clean, quiet, and completely our own. I looked at the empty hallway, then at my parents, and finally at my plate. It was a belated Thanksgiving, but as the warm air from the vents circulated through the clean, quiet living room, I knew it was the best one we'd ever had.